Hey there, it's Steve from Serious Keto, and this is part one of the fourth podcast or co-podcast that I'm doing with Dennis from Black Tie Kitchen. Now, the original intent was to just do these co-podcasts once a month or maybe every 6 weeks, but on our last Zoom call, we kind of lost track of time and wound up with enough material for 3 podcasts. So this podcast, podcast number 4, I'm going to split into 2 parts. The first part airing this week and the second part next week. Now this actually works out pretty well because next week I will be on vacation in northern Wisconsin, camping, and this allows me to keep kicking out content even when I'm not around. So there you go. And with that, let's kick off the co-podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the insert name here podcast with Steve and Dennis.
So that brings up a good point because I had proposed to my viewers that we would have some sort of a contest. If someone would come up with a really good name for this podcast, we would use it, and I would send them some sort of prize, or you would send them some sort of prize. And I think 90% of the people said, "Why don't you call it the Serious Black Tie Podcast?" And what I wanted to say is because I was looking for something maybe a little more creative.
Yeah, something that's not necessarily tied to our channels per se, but kind of leverages it to a degree.
Yeah, like I was thinking No Jacket Required or something like that, but I think that's a Phil Collins album.
No shirt, no shoes, only jacket. I don't know.
Yes.
Only jacket required. But then it doesn't make sense because it's like, well, what is this, a fashion podcast? I don't.
Well, and I had thrown out something like the seriously casual or something like that, and you are. I've not played poker with you, but when I mention something to you that you're not thrilled about, you make a face. And
I'm actually pretty good at poker, believe it or not.
Okay, well, when I brought that up, you were just like,
Well, because I was thinking, because the series, I remember we were talking about it, and seriously casual, or wasn't there something, another word we used to like seriously ish, or was that talking about like keto-ish, something like that? I think
something. Yeah, I don't know. Eventually, we'll come up with something, or we won't. We'll hit a point where people just say, "Would you guys quit doing this?" I don't enjoy it.
I know this is not fun. I don't want to watch this anymore. It's too long.
Yes,
but
so where did we leave off last week? We were talking about how hard it is to make certain recipes. And is it worth the effort? Is it something that we would put out a video on? And, we both were kind of the mindset, I think, that we'll follow that passion, for perfection. But then the question becomes, what do we release as a video? Because some things, no one's going to make it. It's like certain recipes out of, the modernist cuisine cookbook. No one's going to spend that much time doing a recipe.
Yeah, this isn't Noma.
I mean, there was a recipe I did out of modernist cuisine at home, these 72-hour sous vide spare ribs, bone-in spare ribs. And then there's this sauce that you made that had, it was like, there was a bottle of wine in it. There was like a pound of beef in it. There were so many ingredients in it. And eventually you reduce all of this stuff down to 1/3 of a cup. That's the yield for the whole recipe. I'm like, this was like a $30 or $40 worth of ingredients to yield 1/3 of a cup of sauce. And yes, it was mind blowing, but you get done with it and you're like, why did I do that? What was the obsession that drove me to that?
Do you find that, and I think we've touched on this before, but at least personally, I try to get to a point where when I put out a recipe, it's going to be good. Like, do you, like, for example, if you put that out, do you think people are like, is it really worth it? You're like, no, listen to me. It's worth it. Like, did you take everything I've said? I've never been dishonest. Like, this is absolutely worth it. Yes, it's 87 hours worth of work. It's $80 worth of ingredients, but holy crap, this is just absolutely mind blowing.
To me, it's all about my credibility. And I think about when I first started keto, and started doing recipes from some channels, some popular, some not so much. And, you'd see like a great looking thumbnail, and, you'd make this recipe and you're like, whoa, this doesn't look like the thumbnail. This doesn't taste like what I think it should taste like. And I'm done with this channel.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be on the receiving end of that. And what can be very frustrating is when I do spend weeks working on a recipe, just iterating over and over and over again because it's not quite there. And you and I've talked about this before. Like the worst place to be on a recipe is like 90-95% of the way, because that's just, the hardest part of football, I think, is punching it into the end zone once you're into the red zone. And that's the same way with the recipe. And I'll just keep working it and working it and working it, and then I release it and I'm like, I'm so proud. And then somebody comes and says it doesn't work out. It's not working. This recipe's trash. And you're like, okay, well, what didn't I account for? Was it a brand of an ingredient? Was it their elevation? Was it humidity? Was it, the type of oven they have? It's out of calibration. That that's a frustrating thing because yeah, I pride myself on my recipes, and you're only as good as your last recipe.
So with that, what are you working on now that's potentially a long term besides the hot dog buns that we talked about last week?
Just why do you keep going there?
Because
It's
well,
a
the
sore
problem with
spot.
the hot dog buns is I've never had a good hot dog bun. It's always been like, oh, this is hard, stale. This is maybe the potato rolls. Those are the only ones that I've found that are halfway decent. But other than that, they're just I don't.
So
Well, we talked about with
right
your
now,
revision obsession, but it's a
yeah,
running joke now.
I think the things I want to do this summer, because we don't have an especially long grilling season here in Wisconsin,
Hmm.
and summer can kind of get past you. In fact, I feel like, all right, we're approaching the 4th of July, which I almost look at as the middle of summer. And I'm thinking, if I even done a grilling recipe yet this summer? I mean, outside of when I showed the sous vide blowtorch gun,
Hmm.
I like to do my own ground beef, to do custom blends, things like that. Of course, now the beef prices have suddenly gone insane.
Yep.
And if you're doing a custom blend where you're doing something like hanger steak and short rib, and I do I want to be making beef that's $15 a pound, for a burger. Um, Sausage making, love doing sausage making, but in both of those, you're starting to get into a bit of a niche in terms of your audience. Who's got a meat grinder or a KitchenAid with a meat grinder attachment? Who's got a sausage press? So there's that challenge. One of the things I do need to do is my umami dust, which it's a little bit of work. You do some stuff in a food processor and then in a spice grinder, and then if you really want it fine, you need to have a fine mesh sieve and kind of be working it through
Hmm.
with your fingertips. And i'm I'm also thinking a secret ingredient to it may include some of the keto chow beef soup base,
Huh.
just to like for when you're mixing it in a burger. What I used to do pre-keto when I'd make this umami dust is I would use, like Better Than Bouillon
I was gonna
beef
say it's
powder,
just bouillon, kind of that you're.
except find me a bouillon that isn't predominantly maltodextrin.
Yeah.
That's the problem. So, I mean, it tastes great in a burger. It's like extra beefy, and then you fry it up in some tallow, and it's beef on beef on beef. But this gets back into what we talked about in last week's podcast, which is sometimes my passion takes me to a place where it's like, will the average person do this? And if they won't, will they still be curious enough to watch the video and be entertained by it?
Hmm.
You put way more work into your videos, and work especially, I think, to make them entertaining. They are miniature movies in many instances. Which is why I was kind of asking the question at the tail end of last week, which is it most important to you that people make the recipe, or that they be entertained? I think I had asked it differently last week. I asked that they watch the video, but is your goal more that people be entertained by watching, or that they make the recipe?
That slightly changes, I think, what I said last week. Because yeah,
That's
we were
why I
talking
asked it a
about
different
it
way.
was about watching it and making it. I mean, I think the road that I've gone down is because I don't see why things should be not entertaining, especially in the medium that we're in. Like it's
Hmm.
it is what it is. Like nobody wants to watch a stale video on TV, so why would they want to watch it on YouTube or online? Um, I still stand by. I'd rather they be inspired by it, and I think the story makes it more memorable. So they go, "Oh yeah, there's this one video of this guy. I don't know. He's dressed up like a mafia guy, and they were making low carb pasta that looked good. That's all I need to know. Like, so okay, so it's doable. All right,
You so the story creates the hook
yeah,
that reminds people, oh, I should make this.
or it just inspires into it. Because I mean, we can think of. I mean, I'm thinking of a bunch of channels now, like Sam the Cooking Guy. Like, I can think of what he's made. Like, oh, that's a crazy burger or fries, or but I don't remember anything that went into it, like at all. Like, okay, well, I know there's beef. There was a bun. Outside of that, I don't remember anything else. But at least if I can remember some secret ingredient from the MSG or some sort of crazy crinkle fry cutter or some or gelatin in the pizza, it's like, oh, okay, well, that's something I need to store in the back of my head, and it's attached to that story, which means it has that connection. That I don't know, would it be a synapse connection or something in the brain? Um, that might inspire somebody to while they're in the kitchen go, maybe I can add some of this and go down this route of cooking something that's delicious and not this bland chicken or bland vegetables, or going like, oh, I can't eat pizza because it's there's no good low carb variant type of thing. So yeah, it's still more on the inspiration route.
I think what I enjoy, one of the compliments or comments that I enjoy the most is when people take a recipe of mine and then start to tweak it.
For the
You
better.
know, eh, eh, well, I don't know that you can make my
Well,
recipes better,
that's
but no, but when they're like what you said about inspiring, they took what you did as sort of the start of a tapestry, and then they added to it.
mm-hmm.
I think that, and then also this is something we talked about a little bit last week, which was early in my career. I was always trying to find an ingredient that people would have to go out onto Amazon and buy, and then hopefully they would buy some other stuff on Amazon, and cha-ching, profit on my 2% commish. So I started looking at ingredients that were uncommon, and things like fennel pollen. I mean, this is like a magical ingredient, especially in Italian dishes,
Mm-hmm.
because they don't exactly recognize what it is when they taste it, but it triggers something in them, happiness, excitement, whatever. And to introduce people to new ingredients, sumac, for
Mm-hmm.
example, or grains of paradise. I did that in one of my recipes, and you're like, if you like pepper, try grains of paradise instead of fresh ground pepper. Fresh ground grains of paradise on your scrambled eggs, you're gonna go to another place. So to broaden people's culinary palate, and by that I don't mean like the mouth. I mean, like, isn't that also when you're drawing that
Mm-hmm.
the
The color
or an
palette.
artist?
Yep.
Yeah. So that you've got more to work with. I just gave you a new color that you didn't know existed that you can paint with.
That's a great way of thinking about it. It's like I want to give you a new color for your color palette. Because just like you said, pepper. Like, how many people? I guarantee, if you ask most people, go, how many types of pepper are there? Like black pepper, they go one. No,
Mm.
there's just like coffee. Like, how many kinds of coffee are there? Um, my friend is a coffee roast, and I always ask people like, what kind of coffee do you drink? Like, how do you drink it? Black? Okay, oh, I drink it with lots of cream, lots of sugar. Have you ever had black coffee? Like, oh no, it's disgusting. Like, okay, well that's because you haven't had that good, like real good coffee, like the florals out of Africa and the very fruity varietal type things, the real earthy ones out of South America or India, Sumatra. So yeah, it's kind of like here's something, take this and see what you can do with it. But yeah, that here's a new color is a here's the color red. Enjoy it.
I gave you a new color. I gave you a new brush.
Yeah. Oh,
Something.
that's That is a fantastic analogy. Because yeah, it might be like you won't ever use this for this. But maybe you have some dish that you've made in your family that belongs to your your ethnic background. So you go, I
Mm.
never thought about that. Kind of going back to the chocolate and pork. It's never been used in Cuban cooking, but it's something that's pretty common in Mexican cuisine. It's like, well, let's try. It's like, oh, that's a game changer. That's a completely different game we're talking now. That's a different color. Like, okay, well, if that worked here, how's it gonna work over here? Can we put it on brisket? Is it gonna make brisket better? It'd be sacrilegious to anybody in Texas potentially, but
Hmm.
does it make it better? Oh wow, that's interesting. Okay, it did. Huh. All right. What else can we do it? Can we add brisket to duck? Like, what if we cooked? What if you cooked brisket in duck fat? I mean, it sounds sacrilegious, but people use tallow, so why not duck fat? Is that going to be just mind-blowingly good? I don't know.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to try it.
Well, I've got a bunch of sort of the flavor matrix type cookbooks, just
Mm-hmm.
books, that range from,
The Flavor Bible.
yeah, there's the Flavor Bible. That was like the first one by Karen Page and Andrew.
I forget his
Uh,
name.
yeah, it's like something Dornberg. But I mean that they did a bunch of books, or they did that. They did the like the Food Lover's Guide to Wine. So
Mm-hmm.
it's all wine pairing, and so that's a quick and dirty reference. But I've got ones that are like crazy scientific that talk about big words I can't remember, and you're just like, oh, okay, I never thought why these two things might work together, but now I'm curious. And then we had talked last week about when do we run out of recipes. I think when you've got books like this that can provide an inspiration, in terms of a sauce, a marinade, a rub, things
Mm-hmm.
like that, then we've got all these different proteins we can put it on, and just see what happens.
Yeah, or even just I think of ice cream a lot because that's what I'm still working on. Is the well, there's vanilla, there's chocolate mint, there's cherry Garcia, there's cherry, there's chocolate cherry, there's vanilla cherry, there's and you can get kind of crazy because I've ever seen on was it Iron Chef where they made like a fish ice cream and it sounds horrible, but then you go maybe not. Kind of like when you put chocolate on bacon, like well, that sounds disgusting, and then you try like this is great because you got the sweet, the savory, the salty, and it starts making something better. Like what if there's a hot sauce ice cream, sweet and acidic, could work.
Well, I've had like a habanero margarita before,
Oh, those are fantastic.
and it's the first time you have it though, it's like there's that not really cognitive dissonance, but there's just this incongruence to it, because you're drinking something cold that is simultaneously burning your mouth.
Yeah, it's kind of like or at least we've gotten to the point where when you drink something or eat something that's not the color you expect it to be, like oh here I'm drinking something that's watermelon juice and it's colored green or purple, you're like this or blue, like this doesn't, like your brain's like I don't understand what's happening, this is something's wrong here. Yeah, it sets those parts of the brain going wait hold on back up, and you start getting okay with it.
I think it was in. Have you seen the documentary Som, about these people
Oh
taking the
no, I
sommelier
haven't.
master
No,
test? All right, interesting thing. I'm a wine drinker, so I enjoyed
I
it a lot. But
couldn't tell.
they were they were showing how, like, lots of people simply, to your point, if they added food dye, a red or purple food dye, to a white wine, people perceived it as a red. They drank it and they're like, it could be a Chardonnay, but they drink it, it's colored red,
It's a
and
cab.
suddenly, yeah, they think it's a Cabernet Sauvignon. So,
Perception plays a lot into it. Well, and again, it kind of goes how we've talked about how there's that emotional aspect. Obviously, olfactory plays a big sense or a big part of memory. So when you trigger that one food that has potentially that one ingredient that triggers that, hey, this brought me back to I don't know whatever it was. Like, have you? I'm sure you've had it, but have you ever had that sort of ratatouille moment where something brought you just kicked you back at some point in time and you go, oh wow, this just holy crap, I was sitting on my porch as a 7-year old again and just completely remember the time my mom brought me these cookies or something.
oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think this also then plays a little bit back into another topic that we had last week, which was, the oftentimes that memory though is so much more intense. It has over time, like a wine or a cheese or something, it is aged and become more intense than what it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
So, what we remember in terms of the smell of those cookies or the taste of those fries has become amplified. And then we go back and we try them again, and they weren't as great.
It's like chasing the tail of the dragon. It's never as good as the first time. They say, I don't know.
All right, that's it for part one. Next week, we'll be back with part two. In the meanwhile, if you're interested in just some solo Steve podcasty action, check out my other channel, Lean Body Mind, which I'll link to down in the description below. Thanks for watching.